Go for it.
Good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever the heck in the world you are. Guys, what's going on? It's V, the Guerrilla Economist, coming to you live with CJ. He's in the background making sure that this broadcast is coming out crystal clear. He's working the dilithium crystals and the flux capacitors to make sure the airwaves are smooth. We have a special guest for you today. It's none other than Monica Perez. And if you don't know who Monica Perez is, she is a rising star in the freedom and libertarian movement. She has an awesome radio show that's broadcast out of Atlanta. And you can find her work on monicaperezshow.com, as well as her YouTube channel, Monica Perez. And she does a lot of work with our buddy, Jeff Berwick, at Anarchast. She's done a couple of interviews there, as well as being somebody who promotes Anarchapulco and the whole anarchist, anti-statist mindset, which we at Rogue Money are all about. Monica was born in Brooklyn. Brooklyn, where you at? And raised in the suburbs of New York City. She grew up the youngest of 9 kids in a blue-collar Roman Catholic family and is now the mother of 1 daughter and 2 sons. Monica's worked as a waitress before and during college, received several generous scholarships that allowed her to transfer from community college to Harvard. She's earned an associate's degree in liberal arts from Rockland Community College, a bachelor's degree from Harvard University with a concentration in economics, law degree from Stanford Law School, and a master's in business administration from Stanford Graduate School of Business. Monica is a chartered financial analyst and a member of the bar of the state of New York. She has worked as a commercial banker and an investment banker, among other things, as an anarcho-capitalist, which is awesome, extreme libertarian for those that don't know. Monica is a proponent of the Austrian economics, amen to that, and an uncompromising defender of personal liberty. Monica, in other words, you are an overall 100% badass. Welcome to the show.
It's funny you say all that stuff, but really the majority of my time I spend picking up dog poop and making lunches for my kids. It's that paradox. Like if you do all that stuff, you come out of the box swinging, and then life hits you and you realize what you have to make time for, what your priorities are in the short run anyway. But I think I would absolutely go out of my mind if I didn't engage intellectually on all these matters, both like the deep stuff, the theory stuff, and the current events, and how, because when you do have kids, you can't, I used to be on the 1,000-year plan. I was like, humanity will be ready for voluntarism eventually. And then I was like, oh crap, like my kids have to live through those 1,000 years. Like, no, we need to at least kick the can down the road, try to put some brakes on here, or if anything, let's just at least, although I am an anarcho-capitalist, I think it would be good to preserve the Bill of Rights for as long as possible.
Oh, absolutely. I'm with you on that. I mean, it's like, you look at the mundanities that we have to do in day-to-day life, and then you think about all the things that we're doing intellectually to really push these ideas to the forefront and to germinate these ideas in the minds of men and women everywhere. It truly is like a Clark Kent Superman type role,
Well, somebody has to do it. I mean, I worry because I feel like, especially what goes on today in the news, and I for a couple of years now, it took, once I started doing radio, which I was billed as hardcore libertarian, and that's what I am. But when you really start digging into the news, you realize there's so much BS there. Like I used to think that the government was just theoretically had a conflict of interest with the people, and then I saw they actually certain elements, the most powerful ones, I think, actively work against peace and prosperity so that they retain a purpose. And when you see that, and then, so I would start to peel the onion and see what was going on. I could really bring some insight into what was really going on. And then 2016 happened, and I was like, man, did I peel the onion too far? Did I not peel it enough? Like, I did not see that coming. So now I'm starting to wonder, like, is there any, I think the internet, which, is a tool of the state, is also a possible tool for us to fight back. And what they're probably doing is just overwhelming us with info, misinfo, disinfo, so that we can't be effective. But, I start to get a little disheartened that what's the right path. So that's why right now I've decided to regroup, take a step back, and just say, hey, I don't know what's up with this guy. I don't know if it's real or fake, if it's a psyop or what, but I'm going to hold the standard of the Bill of Rights up to everything that comes down the pipe. And it doesn't matter what's really going on if we can all agree on it. That's why it's good that it was written down on a piece of paper. We can all agree on it, and let's stick to that, because I feel like our efforts, we're all putting a lot of effort in, and I hope they're not wasted.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Looking at the information that's coming out on a day-to-day basis, looking at everything that's occurring globally, geopolitically, there is a paradigm shift, and there's a massive, massive paradigm shift that is occurring. To really begin to change this whole thing, we could look at it abroad, look at it internationally. That's where, the rest of the world started waking up, started realizing, wait a minute, you guys want us to maintain the dollar as world reserve currency. You guys want to keep the hegemon of the petrodollar. You guys want to keep you want us to utilize you as the importer of last resort, wherein we hold U.S. Treasury notes as a reserve, and then we reinvest into your markets. But wait a minute, you guys are devaluing your currency. Wait a minute, you guys are spending money like a drunken sailor on shore leave, ruining the value of what we hold. This is ridiculous. And then the world began to switch away from that, specifically led by what I call the Sino-Russian nexus. And now the U.S. is pretty much on the outside looking in. We're and then the deep state itself that you often talk about, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. It is a clash. There's some sort of internal war going on. And Monica, there's so much information coming out every second. It's like, wow, what's disinfo? What's truth? I've never seen it like this intense before.
No, and I would say it's possible that all that you describe is true. And even that is just, the first or second layer of the onion, that ultimately what you're talking about is an intentional restructuring of the monetary regime, that even if Russia and the U.S. go to war, even that, that's how you change monetary regimes, is that kind of massive conflict that they don't care about, because, of course, all wars are bankers' wars. So where I look and I think, are we and Russia getting into this with full knowledge of where it's headed, and for this small elite group that really has no loyalty to the nations they came from? So like when you say U.S. versus other people, maybe it truly is like the classic conspiracy theory, this international elite that doesn't care about deindustrializing the West or building up the East, because ultimately they just want convergence so that they can run it from the top. Is that too far down the rabbit hole?
I don't think it's too far down the rabbit hole at all. I have a good buddy of mine who's served in the intelligence services for many decades, served under Reagan, was very instrumental in the takedown of the Soviet Union in the late 80s. He ran the whole. He was one of the guys who ran the whole entire ruble hyperinflation scheme that helped crash the Russian economy.
Yes.
And one of the things that he said is he's like, V, these groups of people, these guys, they go way back. He's like, after they wrecked Rome, they picked up shop. They went over to England. They wrecked England. Now they picked up shop and they came to the U.S.
So he's the Venetian. He's the Venetians. It's so funny. My spectrum of conspiracy theories is, you can read, is like from the Venetians to the Venusians. Like it's either lizard people or original international bankers, and everybody in between, from the Queen of England to Israel to the Russian oligarchs, wherever it falls in. And I wonder sometimes if the people who created the monetary system in Italy were the ones who kept it forever, or if John D. Rockefeller, who basically kind of tried to monopolize oil, saw what was coming and set it up so that he could kind of control it from the grave in perpetuity through foundations and think tanks and stuff. So, but it's interesting that you had a friend who, anytime I hear somebody who's been in intelligence for decades, unless you really know them personally, it's, people email me and stuff that want to be on my show. Oh, I want to tell you what's really going on. I'm like, you're an operative. I'm not talking to you. It's like, I've been on Fox. I'm like, that's why I'm not talking to you.
You read the book by the Murder on the Orient Express?
I'm familiar with it. Yeah, I definitely saw the movie a couple of times.
Well, if you remember the whole story, right? It's like the way I describe this whole globalist cabal. It's like the Murder on the Orient Express. These guys want to kill human individual liberty and freedom. And so Monsieur Perot, the detective, he's on the train and he's interviewing every single suspect, and he
Yes.
realizes every single
They all
person has
did
a
it.
motive. They all have a motive to kill the guy.
I know, it's really the one thing that I think you can kind of or I feel like it has to be true is that the people who want to kill individual liberty want to kind of morph us from this rules-based Bill of Rights, all that kind of stuff, into this hierarchical, the masses, make sure the cars are driverless and the arable land is all gobbled up. They must think that they're basically a different species and that they're going to maintain that distinction forever. You know, I mean, why would you set up a world like that for your own kids? I feel like they must think they can keep it contained, or that their name is the legacy. They don't even care about their own children. They just want to make sure that it's, whatever, Tudorland or whatever the world is called. I mean, that's the thing.
Goth, the land of Goth.
Yeah, because it defies humanity. It defies the fact that we all have this basic, drive for liberty, dignity, the nobility of man. It really shows a contempt for our dignity, if nothing else.
I was reminded of one thing. The name of the Rothschild guy who committed suicide. CJ, do you remember that guy, man?
The guy who was a Russian spy?
No, he was a Rothschild. I'm looking it up right now.
It was Rothschild who was a communist spy, and then Wilbur Ross, of course.
The Rothschild. That's who it is. It was. Yeah, Amschel Mayor James Rothschild.
He killed himself?
Yeah, he killed himself. He killed himself in '96. He didn't kill himself. They hung him from this in France in his son. I'm sorry. In France, they hung him with his feet still touching the floor. There's a lot of symbology there, and one of the things that that Amschel Mayor James Rothschild has, he was actually good friends with the same buddy of mine who served in intelligence. He has a degree in MIT, and him and his mentor, so to speak, were in a lab when Amschel kept telling him, hey, since I was young, my parents and my family, they've always ingrained in our head that we are not quite human, that we are separate, that we're special, we're different. And one of the and he's like, I've known a lot of the evils that my family has done. I want to come clean. I want to come out. I want to blow the lid off this whole entire thing. And he kept saying that, I keep being told that I'm not fully human. I'm not fully human. I'm not fully human. And to test it out, my friend, him and his at that time his senior colleague took a blood test, and they took his blood and they actually ran through a spectrometer where they were able to zoom in very high powered. I mean, there's a whole litany of science breakdown that he spoke to me about that, he speaks as a physicist. And when you get deep on stuff like that, I'm like, okay, you obviously can't repeat those things unless you actually worked with those things.
Right. Yes, that I wonder sometimes. I'm like, wow, That really does. I look it up and I'm like, boy, what he just said is true. He must be for real. No, exactly. But I'm hanging on your every word. Keep going.
Yeah. So they were able to zoom in so much where they're actually looking at the blood. They're looking at this almost like for lack of a better word, almost like a DNA structure. And within the two strands of the helix, he sees like almost like a worm going back and forth between the helical structures, back and forth. And they were like wondering what the hell that is. And they get closer, it's an actual like a filament that's allowing going back and forth. And they've never seen that before. In humanity, you don't see it. But they see it with these guys, and they were baffled, to say the least. I mean, he has his own theories about it, but he was baffled, to say none the least. And this is something that was a unique trait that they have, because they believe they're not from here. They believe that they call us the apes, so to speak, and hence their.
So is this written down anywhere? Can I get the backstory on this?
I'll send it to you. I'll send you the right after we're done with the show. I'll send, when we're off the air. I'll give you the thing that he wrote, and he written it through a third party, so he wouldn't have his name tied back to it. And I could even get you in touch with the gentleman who actually performed the test, and you could see his credentials. Like,
there's a crazy story, or it sounded completely crazy to me, but it just dead ends. So it's not like a psyop that has some lasting impact. Like we need to go to war with the aliens. There's a guy, Jeffrey Allen Lash, in Pacific Palisades or Malibu. Did you hear about this guy a couple of years ago? Who he was found on the side of the road. I thought I was going too far down the rabbit hole to say there was like a cabal in charge. Or immediately jumped the shark as far as rabbit holes go. This guy, Jeffrey Allen Lash, was found on the side of the road rotting in his car, corpse.
Wow.
And he had told his girlfriend, I am a hybrid, a human alien hybrid. I am a government basically experiment. I got this horrible like sickness or radiation poisoning or something. I'm dying and there's nothing I can do. But what you need to do is just leave me in the car and leave town, and someone will come get me. They're aware of me. They will just clean this up. Get out of town. So she disappears for 2 weeks. Nobody finds him. And I guess maybe she came back and called the cops when she saw his body there. And he had apparently gone to local restaurants. He would only eat raw meat, this kind of stuff. So I was like, yeah, right, whatever. That's just a story. However, in his apartment or in his house in Pacific Palisades, there were hundreds of guns and weird vehicles, amphibious vehicles, ammunition, just huge amounts of stuff, all legal and registered, which is actually impossible according to the laws of California to stockpile guns like that.
You can't, unless
you can't.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's the craziest thing. So you read it, and then the only follow-up story there ever was, I don't know if it was in Vanity Fair or something, it was some real publication, whatever, mainstream media, real fake news, whatever. And it was just the only follow-up story was like this massive whitewash that was like, oh, there's a reason for all of this stuff. And it's like, wow, if you hadn't done the whitewash, I would have ignored the whole story.
Sure.
So that's just one story I simply cannot reconcile with anything. I mean, I hate to go all the way down. I can't go all the way down that rabbit hole where you start talking about aliens and stuff. However, it's a story worth just putting in the back of your brain, and who knows what'll come up eventually. But you got to look at Jeffrey Allen Lash.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely will. I mean, there's something going on. That's for sure. And I think this whole alien thing I think there's a deception in that in and of itself with that whole concept. One of the things my buddies also said to me is something that they've known for a while. And when he explained it to me, and he actually showed me the physical proof, I was actually in California. I was with my business partner from Hong Kong, and we were sitting in a hotel. We had two other gentlemen there, and literally he busted out a piece of paper, not a paper, and a piece of evidence that, number one, he solidified his bona fides, number one, and number two, it had to do with the lunar structure itself. And when he brought out the evidence that he traveled on the plane for, because he knew I was going to be in Cali, and he's like, all right, I'm coming to meet you. And he flew in from the Pacific Northwest, and immediately came down to California to meet up with me. And he said, look, I got a special treat for you. And this is something that he got from how I can't even go. I'll tell you when we're off the air. But
wow, deep stuff.
When I saw it, I fell over backwards. And it's absolutely true. The freaking moon, it's been parked there. It's in an artificial orbit. It doesn't rotate. NASA like 2-3 years ago.
Well, what it does is it rotates and revolves at the exact same time, right? So you can never see the back, which is
no, it's completely stationary. It doesn't move at all. It doesn't move.
How can we verify stuff like that? My husband said said at a party once that I have no way of verifying the moon landing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I was like, dude, that is not, you can't make a comment like that in polite society. Like it's not okay. You can't say, and a guy was there who actually, the reason my husband brought it up is because a guy was there who worked for NASA. It's like, what are you doing? Like, these people are going to be running and screaming. But when I asked them, how do you verify that? And I have a friend who did it was an exchange teacher in Ukraine. And she said, as a rule, I mean, those people do not believe in the moon landing. Like in Russia, like the vast majority, nobody believes in the moon landing.
Nobody believes in it.
Nobody believes in it.
Except us.
I don't know if I do. I mean, I think it's there. They need to prove it to me. And I have not I do not feel proven.
I don't buy a lot of it either. I think the earlier missions were possibly even frauds, and I don't think we
See,
need.
I didn't know this about you. I didn't know how deep your rabbit hole is.
Oh man, we touch all subject basics. Everything's connected, man. I mean, economics runs everything. I mean, even religion. I mean, religion is what? It's economics applied to politics.
Monica, welcome to Rogue Money.
I've got to think for a second. Wait, you just blew my mind. I need that mind vitamin again. What? Economics? Religion is politics?
Yeah, economics runs everything. And religion is organized religion is simply economics applied to politics. That's all it is. That's all it is.
Organized religion is. You got to flesh that out for me.
Yeah, well, if you look at organized religion, right?
Yes.
Its existence, like any sort of bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Let's take into the matter like the first century Christian church. Okay,
right.
The first century Christian church followed a very Hebraic, ancient Near Eastern structure where it's kind of like a circle where everybody kind of shares. It's smaller groups. Everybody, gives. Everybody. It's almost like a collective. It's it's very giving. That whole 9 yards. And it wasn't until Christianity began to spread into the Western Hemisphere that we had this Greek structure, which is the Greek pyramidal structure, where you have the pastor and the clergy up top, and then everybody skirts from the bottom. So now we've created a corporate structure. Okay,
well,
that never existed.
Yeah. Okay. I've got two things to say, which I'm not sure is fleshing your point out, but I think it's interesting and relevant. One is that I read a great, like a potboiler philosopher, like a history for the common people from like 100 years ago, which now would be not for the common people because of the dumbing down. But he said it was Will Durant. He pointed out that the Christian church, like the monasteries and stuff like that, were Platonic, that they were, instead of like the individualism of Aristotle that Christianity and kind of the Venetians, they say, kind of embraced, that they had that kind of philosopher king thing where like all the, it wasn't like you raised your own kids or anything, like you'd sent your boys to this thing and they did the job that was suited to the community. They obeyed. The smarter people rose to the top. Yep. But on a more, and I'm not a Platonist because he was the collectivist, the original collectivist, I'm more of Aristotle, but as an anarcho-capitalist, I try to point out to people that, now I'm not saying there's no abuse of power, or I'm in favor of it or not in favor of it, but as an example, I see that when you try to tell people that the modern state is not necessary, it's like talking to people in the Middle Ages, from what I've read, about God. Like they can't question the existence of God. They could not question it. It was something that just like, oh my gosh, you're an idiot. It's like, that's not an answer. I might be an idiot.
You're a heretic.
Right. So I'm a heretic. I'm a modern state heretic. But I try to point out to them, look at the Catholic Church, for example, and maybe all churches, I don't know, but the Catholic Church is 1 billion people, more than 1 billion people. Yeah. What are the two things government's for? Behavior and taking care of each other or whatever. So the Catholic Church, it has voluntary behavior control and voluntary taxation. It's super, super rich. And people give it to it voluntarily. Like it's an example of how, an organization that does not use force. It uses psychological tactics. But anyway, I'll have to reflect more on your
Yeah, when you look at organized religion today, that's a perfect example. Look at the Catholic Church. What is it? It's really economics applied to politics. Religion is a form of control, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm a spiritual person,
I mean, it's good. I mean, it can be good. Like you kind of want people to control themselves. That's a good thing.
Right. Yeah. So we it's if you look at most religion today, it's a fear-based control mechanism. And there's a lot of close alignment with the state, and of course, within these each respective denominations, there's always fringe movements that are much more they're much more stricter to the adherence of the original word, this, that, and the other. But when you look at it at these big mega churches, this, that, and the other, even in Islam's a political system, right? And
a political system that does not like usury. That's why it's got to go.
Right. Right.
It occurred to me one time. I was like, oh wait, they're not going to buy into the World Bank. Oh, they got to
go. Exactly. So these are the types of different modals of the modalities of control that we're seeing in the world. It's Truly remarkable.
Yeah, interesting. You know, you've now you've got my wheels turning. I've got to think. It's
Flesh it out. It's fascinating.
we probably have to pull ourselves out of this rabbit hole just so that we can keep talking. Otherwise, I'm just gonna, contemplate my navel and be like, wow. So how can you be spiritual and still? I mean, I actually struggle with that. So I'm a practicing Catholic.
Sure.
From the point of view more of hope than faith. I was not given the gift of great faith. I'm way too intellectual for that. I can see the mechanisms of how these things evolve. I think Pope Francis is probably an atheist. I just don't, you know what I mean? But as my mother, real Brooklynite, said I said, I don't know, Mom. I think I'm going to just stop thinking about it and just do it, like, for my kids. And she said, yeah. When I was 19 years old, I just said,
perfect accent.
It's a better way to live. And I just don't worry about it. So, it's a better way to live if you don't let it, create a psychosis about your natural drives and everything. But so I look at the political structure of religion and how it's used, and Pope Francis comes out and makes these comments that completely support the most shallow narratives, that, like, when he told us to pray for the Egyptian Copts who were beheaded, which I don't know if you happen to catch that, it was completely fake, like on the shores. Remember that?
Yeah.
Actually reported on Fox News that it was a green screen. It was looped. There weren't 21 people. There were 7 and whatever. And this guy, the Pope, has like the fantastic intelligence agency. If I know, he knows, and he still comes out against these things. So I see all the problems with it.
Yeah. And when he also says communists are the best Christians as well, and
he's just, I don't even care if you're Catholic or not Catholic, but the Pope should be Catholic.
Exactly.
He shouldn't recommend stealing. That as soon as he said wealth should be redistributed by government, which is
forget about it.
Stealing and killing. It's very hard to find a Pope who's actually said that. I never could until this guy, assuming the translation is right. But then I look at it all and I say, yeah, but I can't figure out the true nature of power on Earth, much less the universe. I have no idea what's going on in the 5th dimension. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know how we got here, how I have a consciousness. So I don't want to give up. I have hope that there certainly has to be something totally outside my realm of comprehension. And how do you live in hope of that? Yeah. I like the structure.
My thing is, my thing on that particular topic is this. I always, have come to this realization. I mean, most of my adult life, I was an atheist, and my basic drive was to study religious works and deconstruct it and make people look like idiots. And
that's a good place to start.
It's a great place to start. And there's many nagging things. I have my original background is in biology, and I have clinical nutrition. But so my whole thing was, there was a lot of things that were gnawing at me from an evolutionary standpoint. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's 3 theories of evolution. There's macroevolution, spontaneous evolution, and progressive evolution. Each one says the other 2 are impossible. I'm like, okay, this is a problem.
Yeah, I have to say, the idea of random mutation as being the origin of species, to me, is mathematically impossible.
Stupid. It's mathematically
it's just mathematically. I mean, that's like self-evident.
Exactly. And then people are like, I got to a debate with actually this guy named Peter Duncan from, at that time he was working for ABD. He was one of the scientists over at Applied Biosystems. They were the company that was actually mapping the human genome. And I was, arguing intelligent design versus evolution. And he got toward a new one. And he was like,
even not intelligent. I haven't even made it as far as intelligent design. I have just said that to have random mutations that accumulate before they come up with an adaptation that wipes out the rest of your species.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? They can't be cumulative and wipe everybody out each one at a time. So the guy with the first messed up mutation has to get the second messed up mutation and the third one and the fourth one before he has any advantage. And what's the mechanism to promote that?
Exactly. And that's the whole thing. That's why they cannot prove evolution on a molecular level. You need 9 essential aminos in order to create a single cell organism, and a single cell organism is infinitely complex. And if you take these 9 amino, it's the equivalent of, mathematically, it's like me taking you on a plane, blindfolding you. We're flying over the Sahara Desert. I take 9 grains of sand, color each one red, and I throw it out the window. And I said, okay, Monica, go find it. You're like, what? It's the same amount of time. And then,
Wow.
I mean, look at like the whole transitional species thing. You look at like bats, right? How the hell did a bat evolve? At what point? Okay, the typical glib elementary school evolutionist would say, "Well, the bat evolved because of its climate, because of its environment, the
Caves are
stresses
dark.
on it." At what point did the bat? See, the bat's got to figure out he's got a lot of problems. Number one, as he's growing these wings, these random mutations that are appearing out of nowhere and hitting his genome, completely transforming him. As he's growing his wings, he's got to make sure that as these wings are growing out, that he could still eat.
Right.
He can still move.
Now the fish is with the pointy beaks, like that seems like I really don't know anything about biology, but I could see on the margin those, single allele mutations or whatever.
Oh yeah, that's like that's like natural selection. That's okay. That's completely normal.
Yeah,
but interspecial jumps. I mean, how does a
right.
four-legged rodent?
The name of the book was The Origin of Species, and I'll tell you, I read a book, very simple book. A Catholic priest actually gave to me, Makers of the Modern Mind, and it took 9 people: Newton, Darwin, Dewey, who did the education system, and it talked about how each of these guys, whose ideas were not necessarily new, but at that moment, the ideas could be embraced by the system or the hierarchy, the elite, or just society, and that these were essential elements to how the modern mind thinks. And with Darwin, they say, and I think this is true. I mean, I'm not 100% intuiting this, but I think it is true that without Darwin, they really would not have been able to completely transfer from Christianity to secular humanism.
Oh, 1,000%.
People need evolution to not believe in God, even though you kind of, had it all start. There's no spontaneous generation of life. Order cannot come out of chaos. Like, there are a lot of fundamental laws that make you think there's something that we don't get.
Right.
But I feel like the Darwin thing, which is so self-evident to me. I got a book called Developmental Plasticity. I don't know why I picked it up, some crazy textbook. And then because I was trying to figure out what the alternative was. I don't know. Now it's getting ridiculous. But in the introduction, it was like, obviously we all have a problem with Darwinism. Like, really? You get to say that to each other? Why isn't Megyn Kelly saying that?
Right, exactly. And the crazy thing with all these random mutations, that specific animal, like the bat, now he's got to roll the dice and find an exactly same bat that exactly same mutated with the exactly same compatible.
That's a good point.
He does. I mean, what is their act? And then their answer is, oh, that's called the hopeful monster theory. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Well, the dinosaur laid the egg, and the Franken chick grew up, and he was able to find another Franken chick. I'm like, get the hell out of here. I'm like, at least I explained to you that what I have is faith and religion. You just are masquerading your religion as science. I mean, come on.
Yeah, you're just making stuff up. But here's the thing, or the alternative, I imagine, would be that it's close enough that you can mate with them, which actually defies the definition of species. You can't mate and have fertile offspring.
Correct.
That their messed up mutations are actually dominant genes.
Right.
Which you wouldn't think so. And I have this weird thing. Human beings have all these Neanderthal genes.
Sure.
Did you ever hear that? Isn't that weird? Like,
because the Neanderthals are basically humans that were living a lot longer than we were, because they were actually much more hardier than we were. I mean, everything you like, there are certain structures within our body that continue to grow. One of those things would be your brow. Okay.
Yeah.
Your brow, your jaw, your nose. These things were much more developed. Neanderthals were much bigger than us. They were humans. They were 100% humans. But when they will reconstruct them, they'll make them extra hairy, more ape-like, in order to fix their stupid theory.
Several articles I've read since I've kind of tuned into this over the years, articles, New York Times, stuff like that. Numerous articles say, oh, this humanoid we thought was like a different species actually is a human being who had a big nose.
Exactly.
Actually, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
And another weird thing that this is too much of a tangent, but I'm going to just say this one sentence. I noticed that I was trying to figure out blonde people because it's supposed to be like 20 to 40,000 years from Africa to Sweden.
Right.
To blonde people, right? And then, but Eskimos are totally brown. So, and they were there for like 10 or 15,000 years. So I'm trying to figure it out. And then I noticed, I was like, let me see a map. Like, who's blonde? I happened to notice it's the exact same map as Neanderthals. I wondered if like there was some, You know, like I don't know if that means
Yeah, I
anything
mean,
at all, but I think they
there
would
were,
never talk about that because it would sound like a racial theory. Like even if that's
of course,
true,
yeah.
they can't.
No, I agree with that. I think you hit the nail on the head. It kind of deconstructs their whole evolutionary theory. I think man sprung upon the earth, and he's changed quite a bit, and that's why we have these different races. But yeah, I mean, Neanderthals and Europeans, absolutely, absolutely. The Cro-Magnons and Asians, yeah, totally. The Cro-Magnons were basically humans as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what they're seeing. There's a great sociologist, also Catholic. It sounds like I do all this religious reading. I really don't. I mean, I'm hanging on by the skin of my teeth being a practicing Catholic. I really am, and I really, it's so good for my family. And all I do is pray for faith, though, because it's so hard for me to really embrace all the, I don't want to say trappings, but
Right.
the rituals and stuff, to the power that's imparted to them. When you talk about, like, my daughter's like, "Oh, Mom, if we read the Bible for 30 minutes after communion, we'll never go to hell." I'm like, I can't get my mind around,
No,
rules like that.
Right. You know what I think? I think it's this. What one thing I figured out once I started dissecting the levels of control from man and what I believe God wants us to be is this. There's a. I mean, what is the first thing in Genesis that you read apart from the first verse that where God's talking about the creation of the earth? It's let us make man in our image, right? And when you think about that for a second, right? Let us make man in our image. Well, my guy, again, the same Intel guy who, Mr. MIT physics dude, he broke it down for me in such a profound way years ago and really helped think with my own thinking, especially, when I was starting looking at it from a scientific point of view. When you look at the desk or the room that you're sitting in right now, you look at the computer that you're on right now, and it's all made of what? Matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what is matter? Matter is just basically energy slowed down that you and I could just interpret it with our five senses, right? But when you break down matter even more, okay, you go into now the subatomic levels, and that's like who we are. Like, for instance, I was in the shower one time. I was thinking to myself, I'm like, wait a minute, beyond this flesh and bone, I have cells. Beyond the cells is what? It's atoms. And what are atoms? Which are basically protons, neutrons, electrons. And what's beyond that? Now you're talking about the subatomic level. And one of the things he talked about, he goes, V, one of the things we discovered is that your consciousness is at a subatomic level. I'm like, what the hell is that? And he goes, he started the conversation with where are you? I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, where's your consciousness? I'm like, I have no freaking clue. And he went into theory. He went to the multiple scientific theories as when you study like near death experiences. Most people have this image. Oh yeah, I was looking at my body from the outside out.
Mm-hmm.
And your body's is basically like an earth suit. It's a biological computer. Your consciousness is somewhere else. So that subatomic level. You are experiencing life through this, right? It's your energy. You are energy, right? Just like God. I mean, think about it. It's there's another verse that's in the New Testament says, God has made us a little lower than angels, but has crowned us with glory and honor. And I was thinking about that for a second. I was like, God is, what is the attributes of God? He's creative. He's intelligent. He's all these things, right? And when we talk about angels, we typically think about like Hallmark cards, little baby cherubs. But in the ancient Near Eastern customs and traditions and religions, angels were powerful beings. They could like wipe out galaxies. I mean, they're just badasses, right? And
look at Lucifer.
Yeah, total badass, right? But then he made us a little lower than angels, which caused Lucifer to get all pissed off and huffy, like, what? You made these apes a little lower than me? What? So the whole thing is he made us a little lower than angels and he crowned us with glory and honor. What that means is, to me, as more and more I'm looking at it, the more and more scientific aspects that I'm looking at this whole entire thing, I'm starting to realize it's that we have incredible spiritual potential. Like there was, I remember one time when I decided to leave corporate America and I said to myself, I'm going to make this amount of money in this month. And what I focused on, I achieved, and I went for everything. Like I was trying out this whole YouTube thing, this whole internet thing, and I was like, yeah, let's see where it goes. And I just felt in my heart, what, I felt like God putting it in me and say, you're going to have a media company. And out of nowhere, I got two guys that gave me a call, like, hey man, I want to partner with you, and we're former Silicon Valley guys. I'm like, whoa. Done. So it's like we are creative, powerful beings made in the image of God. And it's not about faith. It's not about hope. It's about knowing. See, once you know, it's like you know your mom loves you. There's no question about that. You're not hoping. You're not sitting there like, I
Right.
hope my mother loves me. Geez, I really hope my mom loves me. Now, this is huge, unless you got a screwed up mom. But more often than not, your mom loves you. There's no question about that, right? So in the same way, we have to have that knowing of who we are. We are powerful beings that are able to influence and change the very dimension that we are living in. And we're the only animal on planet Earth that is able to do that. So we're more than just flesh and blood, that there's a higher purpose to us. And I think there's an awakening consciously, globally, with humanity that's allowing us to elevate ourselves to that next level. And the powers that be are terrified, Monica.
Wow. All right. I have 3 things to say, not as huge as the things that you just said. That would be awesome if we are capable of that. And the thing that makes me think that you might be onto something there is how hard they try to keep us distracted. What I was going to say earlier and just didn't let it slip out is that I don't know how I can't figure out the nature of power on Earth, much less the nature of power in the universe. But because I have to waste my time worrying about the nature of power on Earth, I cannot contemplate the nature of power in the universe, and that makes me mad because that's what I think my heart is calling it.
Easy. I'll give you the keys right now. Don't worry about the nature of power in the universe or the nature of power on the Earth. Start focusing about the nature of power within you.
Nice. Okay.
And then everything unlocks.
That opens the door to one of the things I was going to say. Yesterday, I was talking to my son. He's 11, and he's just a whiz at chess. Like, he doesn't want to play chess with me because it's too boring to wait for me to go. Yeah, I mean, seriously.
Wow.
So it's really messed up. So he quit. Like, he was in the chess club, and he figured out this 4-move checkmate. And
whoa.
In a tournament, yeah, it's freaking amazing. He got me like 3 times. And 3 times the same exact thing.
Wow.
So and the tournament, the teacher told him he couldn't use it because he was like making the little girls cry. So he quit. He quit.
Oh, come on.
I know. So I said, and he hates it now. And I said, look, man, I just got to tell you one thing. I'm not going to make you do it. Then there's a little chess club in my town that I think would be perfect for him. And I said, look, this is the thing. I think there's basically only one way to sin, and it's to know the right thing and not do it. And as a corollary to that, it's to know that God gave you a gift and that you're not using it.
Amen. That's exactly it.
That to me is the sin. I said, when you meet St. Peter and he's going to point to this moment right now, and he's going to say, don't tell me you didn't know because your mom told you. He came back to me and he said, and he wasn't like, I wasn't being a total like head case, I wasn't completely freaking the kid out. He came back, he's like, I want to do it. I want to try it. And I was like, okay, you don't have to do it if there's another problem. Okay. But so that was one thing I was going to say. The other 2 things are just minor, but I one of the big struggles for me with like caring about God is that what it would mean to me. And my question was always this: will I know my own name after my body is dead? Will I retain individual consciousness without a brain? And then the thought occurred to me, I can't even explain how I have individual consciousness with a brain.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? What does the brain have to do with it? The consciousness is too trippy. And then finally, one thing that relates to something we said earlier, somebody sent me something, an old recording of Art Bell talking to some guy about a scientific military experiments in Montauk, Long Island.
Sure.
And in the 70s, and he mentioned, and this was one of those guys when we were talking earlier, and you're like, when your physicist starts talking about DNA, you know that he's a physicist. He might be full of shit, but he's not a complete con artist. He's actually a physicist who might be messing with you for some other reason, but he knows what he's talking about. So this guy was saying stuff like that about the power of sound waves and how they can transmit stuff. So I actually was verifying some of this stuff as we go, and sure enough, the guy was right, and he was talking about this 30 years ago, and I'm looking it up now, or 20 years ago. And one of the things he said was about one of the things they were working on was like transporting the non-physical mind.
Sure, absolutely.
And I was like, I wanted to write the guy off right then and there because that sounds, kooky. Because I I was raised in a secular humanist world. It's so hard for me to get over any kind of social conditioning. Think outside that box. But you got to think outside the box. You have to have these conversations. And it just seemed to me that it would be awesome if, but I really find it very difficult to think I'm going to know my name when my brain is rotten in a box. Help me.
Well, here's the
thing.
thing. Well, here's the thing. There's a difference.
Give me that.
Think about this. See, I think what the problem is this.
CJ, hold on. CJ.
What?
I was just going to say that did you ever expect that this conversation was going to be?
I'm just kicking back, relaxed, and enjoying it. And automatically, I'm thinking here that there's going to be a part 2. So
yeah.
Okay, yes, because I know I don't even think we've got to subject 1 yet.
right. There'll definitely be a part 2.
Is Trump for real? Sorry, V. Okay, I'm sorry.
Problem.
Yeah, I want you to give me the answer. I want you to give me the meaning to life and the universe.
Here we go. I think this is what it is, right? I think the question is, I think a lot of us get confused between brain, right? Everybody has a brain, but at which point does a brain become a mind? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Did you ever see School of Rock?
You can lose your brain, right?
Yeah.
But you're so much more than just flesh and blood. If you're an energetic being, which we are, I mean, there's so much research out there that's showing, hey, we have auras, we have this, that, other, we have, we are like a walking transistor. Our DNA is in a helix. It's like the perfect structure for energy transfer. We're suspended in water. I mean, our body is 75% water. I mean, we are just like conduit for energy.
Freaky. Yeah.
Right? And the question is, at which point does a brain, which is, I mean, because everybody's got a brain. I mean, you're a Brooklyn girl. We can go into the PJs. There's a lot of people walking around with brains. Very few people out there have a mind.
I know, and it's definitely a deliberate thing to keep that from happening.
Yep. Exactly.
That's where Dewey came in with the modern education. I mean, it is intentional that we shouldn't cross over to that point. But I'm with you there. And that is what gives me hope. Where you say like they're terrified that we're going to wake up. What gives me the number one source of hope for me that these people who, if you wanted to put it in terms of good and evil, I would, the God that they're worshiping, I think I don't know, like there's a lot of Luciferian symbolism and stuff like that. I don't know if it's real or just a way to mess with people's minds, but there's definitely a battle going on. And the thing is that for us, I have a moral imperative. I watch this show on HBO, which I might have to stop watching because it's just makes me sick. Westworld.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
It's a good show, but HBO always goes too violent. They always go too sex too, but that doesn't bum me out. The violence just upsets me. Like to condition people to want to cut each other's heads off is just, it's almost immoral for me to watch it. But what the premise of the show is that when you go on this vacation, it's like a Disney World kind of thing. It's a video game, really. It's really a video game you live in, and that you live out your innermost desires, which is always to rape people and kill them.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, and my husband and I are watching this, and he's like a businessman. He's like businessman. Like this conversation. He would definitely have turned this off and put on the Grateful Dead 45 minutes ago. So he's not listening to this. But I said to him, I said that I think that's the opposite. I think people want to be good. I don't think people want to be bad. And he said, I totally agree with you. And that's the moral imperative. It's the nobility of man. It's what separates us from the animals that I think the weakness of this cabal might be that they can't even conceive of it. They don't understand that we're not a bunch of animals, so they could not possibly be prepared, or their psychological experiments, which do bear fruit, ultimately will fail because they're never going to keep us from wanting to have children and loving them.
Exactly. And that's the human spirit. They underestimate the human spirit. They underestimate our drive, our absolute zest to live free. And that is to their detriment. That's why they're failing big league in this world. And
it might be like physiological. There's plenty of evidence that some of these people who rise to the top, not to the gut, sink to the gutter, are sociopaths.
Without a doubt.
No conscience at all. So they wouldn't see. And I've known a couple of people who just like they can lie. You know, it's rare. I mean, I can think of maybe 2 people in my entire life who could just lie to you like that. Like for years, you know, people get stuck in these abusive relationships or whatever because for years they're like, well, you couldn't look me in the eye and lie like that. I mean, you know, it's just not human to do that.
Right.
But if you have that skill, think of the heights you can reach, you know?
Politics is the way to go. You know,
Yes.
The means justify the ends. Everybody's an accessory to a sociopath's world.
Yeah, and so if they're doing that and that's how they're operating, then you know, maybe that's also their weakness in that they don't know how the rest of, you know, what the power is of you know, I was going to say community, which is like the last thing this libertarian mouth would ever say. But,
yes,
but
comrade, I hear you.
You know, say that again.
Yes, comrade, I hear you.
Yes, exactly. So no, but actually, an underlying premise of libertarianism is that there is a natural community. There is natural order. It's the self-ordering system that makes libertarianism as a political philosophy the only kind of moral answer. Because if you didn't have that underlying order, and I have to give you one more example. Forgive me if I go on and on, but tipping. I was a waitress for years and years. Almost never. So for 7 years, I would say I was full-time waitress. I went to school during the day, but I worked 5 or 6 nights a week. And in all that time, I can't even remember, maybe once or twice, someone not tipping me. And there's no law. I made no money. Like, you make nothing. You make $2 an hour and then the taxes. So your check at the end of the week is zero. And it's 100% people paying for what they're getting. No forcible. You can't even call the cops on them for not doing it. Not only is there no enforcement mechanism, there's no law. And they all did it. They all paid for what they got. They recognized the justice of it. Or whether it's censure, they were afraid of being ostracized or yelled at. I don't know. But it's evidence of this self-ordered society, this you know, underlying human connection that I think these guys, it might be their Achilles heel to not realize there is power in that.
No, absolutely 1000%. I agree with you wholeheartedly. So tell me a little bit about yourself and how you came about this.
Wait a minute. Is this the beginning or the end of the interview? I'm lost.
This is the beginning.
Okay. All right. Just to be clear.
This is where it starts. And then we can get into the globalists and what you're thinking is going on with Trump and all that.
What do you mean, tell me a little bit about myself? You know more about me than anybody else I know at this point.
All right, fine. I'll tell you what. Let's talk about your views on what's currently going on. Like, what's on your radar?
That's a great idea. Look, for me, I saw so many signs last year that this Donald Trump thing was a huge psyop. It started with the Kate Steinle affair in San Francisco, if you recall. It's like a murder.
Who's Kate Steinle?
Kate Steinle was the woman who was killed on the pier in San Francisco, supposedly.
Oh, yeah. Right.
But it had all the earmarks of a psyop. And if you dug in, if you saw the guy, the immigrant who was charged with it, the news coverage, the government stuff, it was the official narrative did not hang together. And that is what launched Donald Trump's campaign. So when for something like that to be distorted, it's by the government and the media. I mean, why would they do that? That's a psyop. And the purpose was him. I thought it was to get Hillary elected because he's the only person who could actually lose to her. But it didn't. I mean, I was absolutely gobsmacked on election day. I came in, my 11-year-old. He's the only person in the house watching the election. Came in from some event and he's like, Mom, Trump is winning. I said, they're just doing that so you keep watching. I'll see you in the morning. You know, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. Totally wrong. And I really was reeling and I couldn't figure it out. And I still, you said there's a paradigm shift underway. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, like the immigration stuff. I keep waiting for him to say, oh, I completely cave on everything. Now that I realize we need, peace, love, everybody, come on in. I keep waiting for some kind of, the same mechanisms, the same tactics to be put in place. But today I woke up, they're talking about cracking down on deportation, stuff like that. I'm telling you, I think the ultimate goal, I'm not ready to abandon my understanding of what those with the most power and influence in the world want. I think they want world government. I think they want consolidation. It's probably going to come with a new monetary regime. Maybe it'll be a result of World War III, but I absolutely cannot see from here to there unless these things are ways to get people on board with the policies that they're rejecting. If this is a way to get people on board with massive immigration, or to build a wall and open the door and make a North American Union like Heidi Cruz and Bill Weld wanted, I don't know if it's a trap like that. I think that you can really count on war in the Middle East as being on the top of the pile. And that looks like it's proceeding at pace. Maybe that's all it's about. So, I think that something's being set up. I haven't abandoned my position that world government is still the end game, but I simply can't figure if maybe there are two competing factions who have two different theories of how to get from here to there, or what. I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
There's definitely two competing factions. I think you have the Atlanticists, which are the Europeans, the UK,
Anglo-American establishment.
And the exactly. And then you have the Far East. You have the Sino-Russian nexus. There's two.
But what about the neoconservative Israeli thing? Is that a third, or is that part of the Anglo-American establishment?
That is the Anglo-American establishment. That's a Rothschild.
Then Trump's in with that all. Trump's guy is a Rothschild.
Which guy?
Wilbur Ross bailed Trump out in his bankruptcies while he was the founder and head of Rothschild Inc. in New York.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So the casino things, Trump got bailed out 4 times, I think once by George Soros, which is like another thing. Like, you kind of, at this point, I kind of want to believe that that there's two factions within that faction. You know what I'm saying? That
there's like two articles I wrote on Rogue Money. One is American Maidan, Part 1, and then American Maidan Part 2, which is
a reference to the Ukraine color revolution set up by Soros.
Exactly. Which one of the things that I think I warned about this back in like 2015, that color revolutions are coming to the United States.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, it's here.
Yeah.
My thing will really look. I see so many things happening, and Trump really needs to step up and solidify what's really going on. Number one. Number two, if I don't see in the next few months George Soros taken out, if you don't see any major arrests occurring with top individuals and people, then we've been conned.
Right.
That's the way I see it right now. It's like we've been conned.
Really?
If I don't see Soros, Putin has the balls to put an international arrest warrant out for Soros, but he cannot freeze his assets. Now you're telling me with Trump, who has access right now to the NSA, he has access to that which basically can tell you exactly all the phone calls that Soros has done, where his assets are hiding. I mean, if I'm able to dig up dirt on Soros and put it together in an article, these guys could surely do it. Well,
why do you not want him to do to try Hillary? I mean, I'm not suggesting that they do, but like that,
they're all connected. Like, for instance,
that would be in the same boat. Yeah.
One of the things I wrote about is the connection between Soros and Carlos Slim. There's a huge connection there. They've been involved in what I call the cocaine corridor. They've been involved in businesses that are centered around banking, construction, and logistics, which is perfect what you need in order to transport drugs and to launder the money.
Yeah.
Okay. And they've been up and down Colombia, Panama. They've been in other Central American countries, in Mexico. I mean, there's a new airport terminal built by Slim. Okay, as Soros is in the bag. I mean, it's disgusting. Okay, it's disgusting. And Soros lost $1.5 billion trying to fight Trump. He lost over $1 billion and almost $2 billion trying to fight Putin. And Putin is just way too smart for Soros. He's outgamed him. He's kicked him out. And stopped his NGOs. And so Putin could stop. He can put an international arrest warrant in where if Soros shows up in Russia, he gets arrested on site. But he doesn't have the mechanisms to freeze Soros's assets. And in order to do that, you need to have control of the FedWire and you need to have control of SWIFT, both of which Trump can do. So
Yeah,
my thing is, in the next couple of months, if I don't see a Soros arrest, if I don't see somebody, if I don't see a Clintonista going down, I don't see a big name fall in the next couple of months, this has all been a bunch of horse crap.
Well, I'll tell you, I think that the Soros thing, I look when this immigration thing came down this morning about when it actually looks like he's doing stuff, and if he fixes like the Muslim ban, I'm not saying I approve of those policies, but my initial impression
Let's call it the travel pause. Let's call it the travel pause. It's not a ban.
Okay, travel pause, very good. But it was very ham-handed. Like as soon as I read that executive order, just from my law school experience, I was like, this is a completely unenforceable. Like this is just a bomb. This is just in there. This is a landmine. Why would anyone write it like this? Had to be on purpose. So I thought maybe he was blowing himself up on purpose by trying to look like he's fulfilling his campaign promises and actually burning bridges everywhere. So I want to see how that comes out. It seems like he continues to go down the path he said he was going to go down. So that makes me wonder what's really going on. But my original kind of counter hypothesis was that, and this I think might play out with the European elections, is especially the way Europeans think about this stuff. If you show this American Nazi, and then you have you can really ignite that the liberal masses to say, holy crap, we need globalism. Like we have to have a world government over Trump. We can't push down to the states like the 10th Amendment tells us we can, because then, our slaves could escape to other states, socialism requires internationalism, or people can escape, the brains can escape. That's why I wonder if that's what they want a wall for. But if they can scare them enough, that maybe, my theory is just a possibility that Trump will play into Soros's world government hands simply by scaring the EU, which is his project, back into cohesion.
Yeah,
that's just, but that theory does not, I like you, I'm waiting to see if Trump is really changing direction, if there is a horseshoe, if there's a paradigm shift. I'm really scratching my head and thinking maybe the neocon faction is not aligned with the Anglo-American faction.
Right. There's a lot of infighting in the West between the Atlanticists, the Anglo-American faction, the neocons, the neo-libs. All this is happening in the West, and at the same time, with all their hubris, they still think that they're the center of the world. The problem is this: the sword of Damocles that hangs over the head of this entire Western infighting is the movements in the East. The sword of Damocles is the New Silk Road, is the One Belt, One Road initiative. The sword of Damocles is the Shanghai gold price fix. It is the energy deals that have been agreed upon by Russia, by China, by Iran, by India, by the rest of the world. The sword of Damocles is like the BRICS. Even granted, Brazil was taken out by a CIA coup, Dilma Rousseff, and Joseph Zuma had to face a lot of infighting from Western proxies as well in South Africa. The BRICS are still, it's 105 nations. The AIIB
nations.
Exactly, and then you look at the AIIB, which China created as a counter to the IMF, and who's been funding the IMF for the last 2 years? It's China, and that's why Christine Lagarde, whom I've been calling for years, and CJ can verify this, I've been calling her for years the giraffe-necked woman of the IMF, and ever since then, all of a sudden, she started wearing scarves. CJ noticed this.
She really did. It was like the same time.
You just decided to take it aside just to take a shot at her.
Yeah, exactly. Ever since that was said on the radio, it just started wearing a scarf.
I have a question though. Yeah. Here's the thing where I start looking at the top of the mountain and there's just a big, there's fog between me. I can't see up there through the clouds. Is that if you look at like the history of the Rockefellers, Nixon, Kissinger, all promoting China, our policy always helping China. Even Mao, I think, was a Yale or a CIA operative through some Yale outpost. And then you look at Putin, who was put in by Yeltsin, who was put in by Bill Clinton.
He was put in by Rockefeller.
Yeltsin was, or who was put in by Rockefeller? They all are, basically.
Yeah, Russia
was put in by Rockefeller. Okay. Yeah, so they these people were creations, of the West, of the Rockefellers and that whole cabal. And I don't ever buy like the ISIS theory. Oh, well, we created them, but then they went rogue, and now we have to go there and blow up the Middle East, which we wanted anyway.
I mean, ISIS was about to get their asses stomped right near the Lebanon, the Lebanese border, and who comes into the rescue to bomb the Syrian Arab army as they're cornering ISIS? Israeli Air Force. The IDF comes in and bombs the Syrian Arab army. How convenient!
They've been holding back until I guess they absolutely had to do it. But yeah, But I'm just saying, like with China and Russia, they only got where they were because of this high cabal. And do you put any credence in the random quotes or Zbigniew Brzezinski's books that talk about bringing the East up, deindustrializing the West in order that there can be convergence? The whole Brzezinski's idea that Eurasia has to be the center of power, and it's a battle between I don't know who's even left on the other side of the battle. I see what you're saying about Putin and China. Are there any Rockefeller elements there undermining the Chinese? None left, do you think?
Here's what happened. The Chinese, you see, the Atlanticists, the Western powers, and their hubris and their arrogance thought they could do their whole little social engineering in Russia. You look at the Bolshevik Revolution. None of them were Russians. None of the leaders of the Bolshevik Russians movement were Russian. Look at Stalin. Wasn't even Russian. Killed 54 million Russians. He was a Ukrainian. Mao. Okay, you look at Mao, and yeah, China's had horrific human rights issues, this, that, and the other. At some point, they have kind of bit the hand that feeds them. Like you look at Yeltsin. Okay, when Yeltsin came to power, when the Soviet Union finally collapsed, they put Yeltsin in, and everybody thought, "Oh, this is hunky dory. We got our puppet in." And Russia became pretty much a failed state. You had rampant hyperinflation, breadlines, the whole 9 yards, and its entire industries, its mineral wealth.
Right. They just carved it up, gave it to the oligarchs.
Exactly. And then Yeltsin, the drunk, could no longer hold office, so they had to call. They needed somebody to replace him. So lo and behold, they see this career KGB colonel, lowly, shy little Putin. Little shy, quiet little Putin. Here he comes. And they've made him the new prime minister or the president of Russia. And they, said everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be hunky-dory. They had no idea the guy was an actual patriot. They have no idea that, again, Russian cultures that Russians do not forget. They've never forgiven the Rothschilds over what they've done with the Bolshevik Revolution. Never forgave them. So what happened? Putin comes to power and starts cracking down on the oligarchs. He started jailing them, seizing their assets, throwing them out of the country, destroying them one by one. Throw out the Rockefeller and the Rothschild banks. Killed at least one or maybe even three of the Rothschilds, one of which I could verify. They hung him in Iran, in Town Square, which is pretty remarkable. That was huge. And that started to become the total change of this whole entire thing. And then of course China, right? You look at China, they are all integrating out of the West. Now the Western Atlantis who've initially created this, now again they've underestimated what? Human culture and the human spirit. The Chinese are like, historically we're the Middle Kingdom. We precede you guys by thousands of years. You guys in the West are a blip on the radar. Because we were the center of civilization. We invented so many things. We're not going to allow our birthright to be squandered by a bunch of far-off bureaucrats that live in another continent. It's not going to happen. And now you look at China. They're economically, you talk to most Americans. Oh, China makes Nike Air Jordans in a sweatshop. No. The biggest sector in the Chinese economy is not manufacturing. It's actually banking. 3 of the 5 biggest banks on the planet are Chinese. Okay, and then when you look at what they're doing, they're completely shifting out of the dollar. They're buying gold at an alarming rate, and the Russians are doing the same thing. That's why the sanctions. One of the reasons why the sanctions had no effect on the Russians, because number one, they're trading with China. That's why Obama's stupid TPP is a joke. How can you have a trade agreement without China in it?
Yeah,
that's preposterous.
Well, my thinking was that they had the Atlantic one and the Pacific one, and they had the provision where they could just plug. Yeah. Russia or China in later, but you're saying that was wishful thinking.
That was wishful thinking, and I'll tell you why it's wishful thinking. You look at the G7. They call them the G7. I call them the insolvent 7. What is it? It is a collection.
That's true. They're totally indebted to those people, and nothing explains Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia should not
Saudi's
be
done.
tanking.
They're done. The outhouse of Saud is what they're going to be called. They're
Yeah, I mean,
done.
they were really important to the petrodollar, and nothing really explains why they're, if the Atlanticist powers are in total control, I don't see how they would let that very important tool start to slide like
Well,
that.
I'll tell you how it started to slide. They have 6 major wells. The biggest well is the Gawar well, which was discovered in 1948. That's the biggest well they have. Right now, I have from good sources. And one of the guys that write for me on Rogue Money, we call him the Prince. We know his real name, and I'll tell you a little bit more details about that, off the air. But he's connected to the royals. He's connected to a lot of the royalty in the Middle East, and the Gawar well is right now pumping 90% in water. So most of the water they're pumping in to extract oil is coming right back out.
It's coming right out.
Right, they're running out of it. That's why Saudi Arabia got into an energy war. It's a resource war. They got into the resource war.
It made no sense.
Right, to go after Syria.
My theories about that, at first I thought they let the oil slide to make Russia suffer, and then Putin started buying up oil resources. I was like, oh, that's like the classic crash the market so you can buy it all up. I was like, Putin, if he plays his cards right, will end up on top as a result of this.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
Again, it just didn't make sense. But I'll you make some excellent points. I mean, I have to say, I'm trying to get my mind around this, what does appear to be a paradigm shift. And if they're changing tack in the West because they see that is failing, then that could explain it. Although I can't help but feel that what Trump is doing when it comes to if you throw out all the workers, our wages will go up without increased productivity. He's gonna blow tons and tons of money on infrastructure, lower taxes in what might be a non-growth environment if you throw out all the cheap labor. Then you've got insane debt. The trade deals are one-off things, look very cronyistic to me. It's again going to lower our standard of living. This seems to me like a way to tank our economy so that they can get out of their zero interest rate and perpetuity world and blame it on a conservative. It seems like old paradigm thinking on my part, but what Trump's doing doesn't seem to me the answer to the Sino-Russian alliance. It seems like a deliberate fail, but it could be, another peel the onion thing where Soros and the EU, and then you also have that Germany is the center of the EU. The UK is in competition with Germany always for that regional hegemony.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what explains, if I thought the West were really trying to win, what explains Trump? I mean, do you think that he's going to make America great again? I mean, and what does that mean? Economic prosperity for all? Like, I don't see it.
Yeah, I think the best thing that could happen, I think, to the run up to the elections, one of the things that I spoke about was if Hillary Clinton it's like being in a plane, right? We're about to crash. There's a mountain on one side, there's a rice paddy on the other. And if Hillary Clinton got into that plane and she was the one who was the pilot, she would have just flew us right into the mountain, and that would be the end of all of us. Okay, she would have tipped off a war because she's a psycho, crazy, sick person. Yeah, Hillary. She would have tipped off a war with the Russians, which we would not win. We would have our asses handed to us on a silver platter.
And it might have been at the end of a very useful, left-right paradigm, two-party psyop kind of thing. Like, that would have been the end.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Exactly. The Russians are 2 generations ahead of us in missile technology. They got us beat on so many different levels militarily. We would have got our asses kicked. There's no way we'd win. So then I said, if Trump got in, he's going to crash the plane, but instead of hitting the mountain, we're going into the rice paddy. It's going to be a rough landing. The landing gears might come off. There's going to be a lot of shaking. Sparks might fly. Maybe some old people will die because they had a heart attack. They freaked out too much. but at the end of the day, we get to slide down the chute and live.
Right.
Because the debt in this country has to get dealt with. Mm-hmm. He's got to crash the markets. He's got to overheat it. He's got to crash it because there's way too much debt. There needs to be a global economic reset. With the debt of the United States, this market's got to go. It's fictitious. It's fake. There's nothing real about it. There's no valuations.
I mean, I don't see any way that, and he maybe hinted at this during the campaign, we could just restructure the debt. I don't see any way for us.
You can't restructure $200 trillion.
No. I mean, you'd have to, that's what I think is the paradigm shift, is that, you default on it or whatever, however you're going to call it. You can't just pay it off, especially if you're headed into increasing deficits. I mean, there has to be an end game there. And are you saying you think that he has an answer, like a real answer?
I think there's no easy answer, but all I'm suggesting, the best thing that he could do to inoculate us from a devastating economic crash is to build up our infrastructure, get the manufacturing back,
my gosh,
and then start reverting us into a and perhaps even bring back the classical gold standard from 1870 to 1913.
Why? Because he's a patriot? Why? Who's he working for? Himself? Us? Like, that sounds
I think he is. I mean, the verdict is still out. Let's give the guy some time to work. Yeah. So that's the only thing that can save us. If he can't do those things, then we're screwed.
He reminds me, a lot of his rhetoric, people are like, oh, he's Hitler. I'm like, the rhetoric doesn't remind me of Hitler. It reminds me, there are some elements of Mussolini in it, though, in that the corporate government worked together. I'm serious. And Mussolini, I think, coined the term or introduced the concept of autarky, like autarky, autarky. And the idea was that you as a nation should be self-sufficient. And that's why you want to produce everything at home. And my answer to that was, the only reason to really do that is if you're in a state of isolation. You can't, you can no longer rely on comparative advantage for the economic efficiencies. You have to produce everything yourself, because otherwise you might starve to death. And if that's what these signals are, I mean, what you're saying is that if the petrodollar's over and there's new, the SDR or whatever takes its place, then all those dollars, I assume, unless I'm looking at it wrong, come home. And then you cannot trade. You're going to have this insane inflation, and you really aren't going. You have to produce everything at home, because that's the only place where your money isn't monopoly money.
Bingo. And on top of that, the only way you could get anything paid, you'd have to come out with a two currency system, where you have a domestic currency, which would be devalued anywhere between 60 to 80%, and then you have an international trade currency that could be commodity backed at some percentage, where that could be devalued 20 to 40%. That's the only way out of this whole entire mess. Until we
now you're scaring the crap out of me. At first I was super hopeful. I was like, oh my gosh, we're like made of stardust, and we're going to defeat the evil Luciferian power in the city of London.
Oh, I'm still hopeful, but here's the thing.
Oh my gosh.
Every transition.
I'm getting tinfoil for my windows. I'm buying a gun.
No. But the whole thing is this. It's like with every with this major transition, and at the end of the day, it's going to be a major correction. I think the more educated, the more prepared that we are, the better off we can come out of it. There's going to be so many opportunities. You see what I'm saying? It's like it's. I think there's an opportunity here for the free market to really spring forth, getting rid of these regulations. We can start getting this economic engine running again. It'll be a beautiful thing. But there are challenges. But that being said, we will never, going through this process, we will never be the superpower that we are. We'll never be at the head of the table. The West is right now on the outside looking in, and that's where they will be.
Dude, all right. If this is the end of our conversation, I hope that you can give me one more hopeful, let's think of something more cheerful.
I'll give you one.
What's your favorite?
I'll give you one, and this stems back to part of the earlier conversation, and this was what kind of keeps me optimistic. So I'm the proud father of a son with autism, and I'm very proud that Trump is really leading forward to ask Robert Kennedy to head up a new vaccine safety panel to truly look at what could be destroying humanity.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I have to say, we connected about this, CJ, that I have a son who has Down syndrome. And I was so freaked out, like when Pope Benedict had a 15-year-old cousin with Down syndrome who the Nazis just disappeared. They never saw him again. And then when you feel this culture of death, I guess is what my mother calls it. But I get worried, and I actually got that my son and everybody Irish citizenship. My grandparents were Irish, and I was able to get Irish citizenship for everybody because I was so worried about that culture of death. So maybe if there's a real paradigm shift, perhaps we'll have a renewed appreciation for that life force, that thing that makes us human. It was quite a lesson to me to understand my son who has Down syndrome. I'm so intellectual, like it was hard for me to even understand what really defined that sanctity of life, that specialness of humanity when he was born. And then he's really taught me a lot about that, like his true, what they call in theological circles, intellectual, the brilliance of his intellect in a like spiritual sense. That maybe if the paradigm is shifting, it perhaps cannot be bad to turn away from thinking of people like animals.
Right. Well, and Monica, what you said is exactly true. And my son taught me a lot about myself too. So in terms of, why I'm looking at it, that the earlier conversations around the globalists, the Rothschilds, and I think I've always believed that to them, humanity has been their greatest threat. Yeah. That they've always been at wanting to control society. That's why they the last 8 years they've openly just flooded the gates with government welfare. It's the plantation. To me, it's been the plantation of wanting to control humanity. And this election cycle, regardless of Donald Trump, to me, it's more around the thoughts of electing someone outside of the political class. It's getting someone that has not been in that political establishment for years on years, where we've been led to believe that we truly had a choice of, it's been the left-right paradigm. That's true. It's not there. They report and they work for the same people. So to me, that's what, Trump as a person, I get it. And I understand why people are very hesitant. I get that. But to me, it's more that it's the hope that humanity is rising, and that at the end of the day, that we'll be able to, something that Rogue Money always talks about is that we control the narrative post collapse of what happens.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the genie might be out of the bottle as far as empowering the individual and thoughts that are outside the box, even if it wasn't meant to be. But control the narrative after. Okay, all right, that'll be. I'll consider that a good goal, a focus, because this thing is really. I'm trying to make sense of it. I'm trying to crack the code.
I think it's going to be. Did you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, cool. All right, I thought I lost audio for a second. But it's strong medicine. It's strong medicine we're going to take. But you know what? I'm totally optimistic about it, and I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities, because look, if all we have to go through is to go through an economic reset, okay, where there's going to be some bumps on the road, and if we have the infrastructure, the economic engine of America humming again, we'll make it. We'll make it. But it's so much better than the reality we were facing. It was to the point, like, CJ knows this. I was about to leave the country. I was like, if Hillary's in, I'm out.
No, I know the feeling. I was worried for my son, really. I mean, Down syndrome is considered a choice now. I'm like, and an antisocial one, where people will actually shut you down, like on your Facebook and stuff. Like, I'm paying for your kid, and my kid doesn't get music lessons now. It's like, no, you're not. But whatever. So I hear you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And there's one other thought around that in terms of our roots, Rogue Money and yourself as well, is that in terms of the anarcho-capitalists that are out there, is that, I'm a big believer in almost non-existent in terms of government. I believe in participation in government should be completely, voluntary. However, in saying that, there's got to be a step along the way. You just cannot completely take a society and say, poof, government's gone.
No, we're not ready. No. That's
we're not ready for that as a society. So there needs to be some stepping stones that happen along the way to help, to educate, to get people to understand what that looks like, what it feels like, and they've been they've been conditioned so much by the MSM, by the federal government, to believe that the government is there for a good thing. So hopefully, as a society, we can move forward to understand that the sooner that we get government out of the way, the sooner that we can progress as a society.
So we come full circle, and where our emphasis needs to continue to be, principles are the touchstone. We need to understand them. We need to apply them. We need to hold people to those standards, and not give up that fight, because we do have that liberty impetus, that moral imperative that you can't kill. Liberty will always bubble up. To any little new baby who's born is going to have that. They cannot push that out.
Right. Absolutely. Monica Perez, the woman, the myth, the legend. Thank you.
It was so fun. It was so fun talking to you guys.
Loved it.
We need to do this again.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Absolutely.
Super fun.
Take it away, CJ.